This is my Ice Trap Occultist build, which is what I league started last league. This build is great for clearing your atlas extremely fast and has a very smooth transition from leveling all the way into red maps. This video is going to be an update video for this build, however I still will talk about most of the important aspects of this build, so you won't have to watch the first video in order to make sense of how it all works. Last league had a ton of extra quality of life in the form of easy ways to gain resistance when playing Oath of the Magi. Since that's no longer in the game, it's made it slightly harder at the very end game, since we need to have better rares with higher resist in order to skip purity of elements. This is only an issue if you're looking to play the build past league start, however, but given the potential of the crafting this league, there may be an excessive amount of rares with large amount of resistance anyways, so it's probably not going to be that big of a deal. Also, you could always just get resistance on your jewels if it becomes an issue. What I would personally suggest is sticking with the starter version of this build until you assemble the full in-game version of the build if you want to keep playing this build after you complete your atlas. The only other change that also affects this build is a nerf to Ralakesh's Impatient. It no longer has 30% movement speed, so I've decided to use a pair of rare boots instead, because losing the movement speed honestly is fairly annoying. I'm not sure why they like to do this with rares that are very strong. They could have easily made this like 20% movement speed just slightly worse, and it'd be okay, but taking the movement speed off the item just seems kind of bizarre. Overall, the changes should make the build slightly cheaper since we are no longer using the boots, and the damage is the same if not slightly better after ramping. Alright, and that's pretty much it when it comes to the changes for the build. So now we're going to talk about the path of building itself, and I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough of how this works and the leveling. So the way I do my PoBs is fairly simple. I like to do them as a progression, so you can basically start from level 1 all the way to endgame with the same PoB. You don't have to switch between multiple ones. So the first things first, you're going to go down here to this tab, you're going to switch to leveling to level 28 when you're starting out on league start. You also want to switch out to leveling to 28 in the skills tab when selecting skill set up here. Then you can also switch to leveling in the item set. This will give you some of the crafting options that you can do later on in the axe, which will help you get even further into the leveling process and make just generally the damage that you're doing pretty insane. So once we're here, this is going to be the early tree that you're following, and the reason why we're pathing specifically to dexterity is because unless you get a Jade Amulet, which you can get one from the Solaris quest, you're going to need some form of dexterity in order to switch to Ice Trap as early as possible. We're looking to do this around level 28, which is right when you get Ice Trap, and then from that point on you can use Ice Trap from level 28 all the way through the end game. You will, however, need to path this if you don't get a good roll on your Jade Amulet, which is why I'm just default pathing to this for most people. From that point on, you're going to switch to the after 28 swap, and then so on and so forth as you finish your labs. And that's basically how the tree portion will function. Now, talking about the skills and how you're actually going to level, this has not changed since last league. We're still going to be using Freezing Pulse. It's important to point out when using Freezing Pulse, you want to be as close to an enemy as possible because it does less damage the further the distance the projectile travels. You're also going to be using Frost Bomb. Realistically, you only need to use Frost Bomb on like blue packs. You shouldn't be killing rares when leveling anyway. And then obviously you're going to want to be using it on unique packs or on unique monsters as well, so you're the bosses. You're going to use Holy Flame Totem on bosses. Also, the reason why we're using Holy Flame Totem on bosses is not necessarily for the damage, it's more for the fact that it makes it so the boss will sometimes aggro to the totem instead of you, so you can do a lot more damage in those situations. On top of that, it gives you immunity to curses through the consecrated ground it generates, and it gives you some form of health regen as well with the consecrated ground. Generally, it's just a good option for leveling and helps you with survivability. Early game, you're going to use Frost Blink, and then at level 10 you're switching to Flame Dash. You're also going to be changing out some of the damage supports on Freezing Pulse as you continue to level. At level 16, we're taking Summon Skittered Bots. The reason why we're taking Skittered Bots here isn't because we're using traps yet, it's because we get Chill and Shock, which just generally makes it much easier to navigate through Acts 2 and Act 3. Then you're taking Herald of Ice just to give you a little bit of extra damage. Now at level 28 is when the most complicated portion of the build happens, when you start to switch into Ice Trap. You're going to want to do the library quest in Act 3. This is going to give you access to Ice Trap. You're also going to want to have a Chance Orb here. If you don't have a Chance Orb, you can look to see if you have a Fusing. If you have a Fusing, you can go to a vendor and trade it in for a Chance Orb that way. Once you have a Chance Orb, you can switch to Ice Trap. This will make it significantly easier to level. Ice Trap does a ton of damage early, and if you get a green 4-link, you're going to absolutely fly all the way to maps. From this point on, you're also going to want to switch to a wand and a shield and be using Shield Charge. Shield Charge in conjunction with Flame Dash just makes it way faster through the leveling process. Instead of clearing slowly with using Flame Dash on cooldown, now you can be doing Shield Charge, Flame Dash, Shield Charge, Flame Dash, and then you'll be able to cover more than double the distance in about half the time. Then from that point on, you're just going to get your Frostbite Curse, and then you're going to, again, make sure you're using Herald of Ice and summoning Skitterbots, and then that's basically it for the leveling portion. You're going to move into the starter portion, and then this is going to be basically how you transition from Act 6 and on, as you get access to a 5-link, as you get access to a 6-link, as you get access to some of the more items in the starter version of the build. It's fairly self-explanatory, it should be super easy to follow, but if you do have any questions, feel free to leave a comment and I will make sure to answer them. As for my league start, I'm most likely going to be playing the new Poisonous Concoction, but if it does suck or doesn't look that great on paper, I'll probably actually just play Ice Trap again. But I have been theory crafting a different Ice Trap build, so if you do decide to play this build as your league starter, there might be something spicy coming in the first few weeks of the league to swap to from this build. Thanks for watching.